In the unfolding tapestry of current events, over the course of the past few days, a well-known and recurrent tide of conjecture has once again permeated the digital landscape and traditional media outlets alike, dominating prominent news headlines, fueling fervent debates on various talk shows, and populating the ever-scrolling feeds of social media timelines. All of this widespread discussion finds its focal point unmistakably fixed upon the figure of Meghan Markle, and what a considerable number of discerning commentators are now characterizing as her most recent, strategically conceived maneuver. For a segment of astute observers, this development is being interpreted and presented as an audacious stride towards personal autonomy and a profound process of self-reinvention. Concurrently, for others, it is quietly yet profoundly amplifying a spectrum of serious apprehensions and disquietude within the hallowed confines of royal circles that are, it must be noted, already acutely sensitive and deeply cautious concerning the existing and persistent undercurrents of tension. This unfolding narrative transcends the confines of a single action, a solitary public statement, or a particular professional project. Instead, its true significance lies in the broader, more encompassing behavioral pattern that it ostensibly serves to reinforce and solidify. This overarching pattern has been the subject of extensive and often impassioned deliberation among a diverse array of stakeholders, including those intimately connected as palace insiders, the dedicated community of royal watchers, and indeed the wider general public, a continuous discourse that has persisted unabated ever since Meghan and Prince Harry made the momentous decision to formally step back from their official, frontline royal duties and responsibilities. This most recent turn of events has, quite predictably, served to reignite and bring back into sharp focus a series of long-standing questions pertaining to the complex concepts of loyalty, the meticulous management of public image, and the inherently delicate, indeed fragile, nature of the relationship that exists between the Sussexes and the venerable institution they consciously chose to depart from. Central to the very core of this ongoing public discussion and critical analysis is the pervasive notion that Meghan Markle's distinctive personal brand identity continues its dynamic evolution, progressing in a discernible direction that appears ever more distinct and separate from, and on occasion seemingly in direct opposition to, the deeply ingrained values and established traditions that have been historically and consistently upheld by the royal family. Astute observers and seasoned commentators alike are quick to point out that each novel venture, every published interview, or any public appearance undertaken by Meghan Markle is now subjected to an extraordinary level of intense scrutiny. This examination extends far beyond its immediate content or superficial presentation, delving instead into the profound symbolic meaning and potential implications it carries. For those who adopt a more critical stance, these actions are perceived as yet another meticulously planned and strategically timed endeavor designed to seize control of the prevailing public narrative, an effort that possesses the distinct potential to further intricate and challenge the monarchy's ongoing and often arduous attempts to uphold an essential sense of dignity, project an image of steadfast neutrality, and foster internal unity. Conversely, for her dedicated supporters, this behavior is simply viewed as a fundamental assertion of a woman's inherent right to articulate her views, to engage in creative pursuits, and to meticulously construct a life entirely on her own chosen terms, especially after enduring what they describe as years marked by unrelenting public pressure and significant personal restrictions. The anxieties emanating from the palace, as frequently articulated by well-placed royal commentators, are said to originate not so much from the precise or specific content of Meghan's individual actions, but rather from the aggregated, cumulative impact that these actions collectively exert over time. Each successive public move or strategic decision is invariably interpreted as contributing yet another intricate layer to an already profoundly complex and multifaceted situation. The very existence and enduring strength of the monarchy are intrinsically reliant upon the bedrock principles of stability, an expectation of predictability, and the extremely careful, almost meticulous management of its public perception. Consequently, any element or development that introduces even a degree of uncertainty or unpredictability into this finely balanced ecosystem is almost invariably met with a palpable, albeit often unspoken, sense of quiet alarm and apprehension. Meghan Markle's most recent discernible step, irrespective of whether it manifests as a nascent media project, an official public statement, or a newly forged strategic partnership, is widely reported to be reigniting long-dormant fears that deeply private and intimately personal family matters could, yet again, be inadvertently or intentionally transformed into prominent public talking points and subjects of widespread discussion. This prospect inevitably compels the palace into a defensive, reactive posture, a position that it would, by all accounts, emphatically prefer to circumvent entirely. What lends an especially heightened degree of sensitivity to this particular juncture is its precise chronological placement. At a time when the broader royal family is assiduously navigating its own intricate internal transitions, diligently fulfilling its myriad public responsibilities, and engaged in continuous efforts to judiciously modernize its operations while simultaneously steadfastly preserving centuries-old traditions, the absolute last thing that this delicate balance requires is the advent of yet another tumultuous and potentially damaging media storm. Those privy to the internal workings of the palace are reportedly concerned that even the most oblique or indirect references, or indeed the most subtly crafted messaging, possess the potential to rapidly escalate and spiral uncontrollably into pervasive global headlines. This escalation, in turn, risks significantly overshadowing the more substantive official engagements and the invaluable charitable work undertaken by other members of the royal family. From the carefully considered perspective of the palace, the core issue is emphatically not about an attempt to silence Meghan, but rather it revolves around the far-reaching and potentially disruptive ripple effects that her highly visible and pronounced independence can exert upon a venerable institution fundamentally structured and built upon the principles of collective identity and shared purpose, as opposed to the assertion of individual expression. Furthermore, an equally significant and deeply entrenched issue revolves around the concept of trust, a persistent and often unspoken theme that has demonstrably lingered in the background ever since the couple's momentous departure from their official royal duties. While Meghan and Prince Harry have, on numerous occasions, articulated with striking candor their profound feelings of being unsupported and fundamentally misunderstood throughout their tenure as working royals, the palace, conversely, is widely reported to feel a distinct sense of being blindsided and caught off guard by what it perceives as a succession of repeated revelations and a series of perceived slights. Consequently, every single new initiative undertaken by the Duchess is meticulously scrutinized and viewed through this particular, often critical, lens. This leads to staff members and senior figures within the institution pondering with considerable apprehension whether each new development might inadvertently or intentionally open the door to yet further disclosures or potentially damaging reinterpretations of past events and interactions. Even in instances where absolutely nothing overtly controversial or explicitly critical is uttered or presented, the mere latent possibility of such outcomes is, in itself, sufficiently potent to engender a pervasive sense of unease and profound disquiet within the royal establishment. The public's reception, as is so frequently the case with matters of such considerable global interest, remains profoundly and visibly divided. On one side, a vocal contingent of observers and supporters regards Meghan as nothing short of a visionary trailblazer, an individual who boldly steps forward to confront and perhaps even dismantle an archaic institutional framework that demonstrably struggled to comprehend or adequately accommodate her distinctive identity and her authentic voice. These proponents passionately contend that any apprehension emanating from within the palace walls stems less from a legitimate concern over potential detriment or harm, and far more from an ingrained discomfort with the inevitability of change and an underlying anxiety regarding a perceived erosion of established control. Conversely, another equally fervent faction holds an entirely different viewpoint, positing that with a platform of such immense global influence inevitably comes a correlative and substantial measure of responsibility. They suggest that the consistent practice of referencing royal connections while simultaneously articulating criticisms of the very institution creates an inherently inequitable and unsettling imbalance. This stark clash of fundamental perspectives vigorously fuels a perpetual cycle of online debates and ensures that virtually every single new action or utterance is magnified exponentially, far transcending its original intent or actual scope. Seasoned media analysts and communication strategists frequently underscore the undeniable fact that Meghan's extensive professional background within the dynamic world of entertainment endows her with a truly distinctive and powerful advantage when it comes to skillfully navigating the often treacherous currents of pervasive public attention. Her innate understanding of compelling storytelling, sophisticated brand development, and effective audience engagement techniques is something few, if any, members of the royal family have ever possessed to such an astute degree. From a purely strategic standpoint, her meticulously planned actions often project an aura of deliberate calculation and impeccable timing, a quality that only serves to reinforce the persistent perception within the ancient palace walls that absolutely nothing she undertakes is merely accidental or impulsive. This widely held view does not necessarily imply or attribute malicious intent to her actions. Rather, it fundamentally signifies that the monarchy, a venerated institution historically characterized by its measured pace and often slow inclination to adapt to contemporary shifts, finds itself perpetually in a reactive posture, struggling to play catch-up within an exceptionally fast-moving and ever-evolving media environment. An additional, deeply significant layer to the evolving concern within official circles is the potential and far-reaching impact upon future relationships between key individuals and the institution itself. Certain astute royal observers and commentators firmly believe that each subsequent high-profile public gesture or decision makes the prospect of genuine reconciliation progressively more arduous, effectively hardening entrenched positions on both sides of the familial and institutional chasm. While there are sporadic, albeit unconfirmed, reports that occasionally surface regarding behind-the-scenes private communications, the inherently public nature of the ongoing and continuously unfolding narratives renders any authentic private healing process exceedingly challenging, if not entirely impossible. The palace, it is widely speculated, may harbor profound anxieties that continued public distance and perceived antagonism will inexorably reinforce a permanent and irreparable divide, an estrangement that could potentially affect not only the current generation of working members of the royal family but also, perhaps more critically, the long-term image and enduring perception of the monarchy as a cohesive and unified family unit. Yet, it is absolutely crucial to acknowledge and underscore that a considerable proportion of what is so readily labeled as palace concern is, in reality, invariably filtered and disseminated through the often opaque channels of unnamed sources and the interpretive lens of expert commentary, rather than originating from any official verifiable statements issued directly by the institution. The royal family is, by long-standing tradition and deliberate choice, famously tight-lipped, consistently preferring a dignified silence over any form of explicit clarification or public engagement with speculative narratives. This pervasive vacuum, created by the absence of direct official communication, regrettably allows rampant speculation to flourish unchecked, resulting in virtually every action being interpreted in multiple, frequently contradictory, and often highly contentious ways. Meghan's entire public existence, therefore, unfolds within this very space of inherent ambiguity and interpretative fluidity, a realm where subjective perception can, with astonishing regularity, wield just as much, if not more, influence and consequence as objective reality itself. As this complex and multifaceted story continues its intricate unfolding, one overarching truth remains undeniably clear and constant. Meghan Markle continues to stand as an extraordinarily powerful and influential figure within the vast global conversation, possessing an unparalleled capacity to instantaneously shift the focus of public attention and to vigorously stir strong emotional reactions with even the smallest, most subtle change in her stated direction or public posture. Whether this latest perceived step truly represents a serious and substantive challenge to the established order of the palace, or if it merely serves to highlight an ongoing, deep-seated discomfort with a distinctly modern, unequivocally independent, and assertive royal narrative, depends almost entirely upon the individual's particular perspective and interpretive framework. What absolutely cannot be denied, however, is that the perennial tension between the deeply personal aspiration for individual freedom and the rigid demands of institutional tradition is once again vibrantly and dramatically on full display for the entire world to witness, thereby meticulously setting the stage for further profound discussion, spirited debate, and inevitable, unrelenting media scrutiny. As the underlying conversation concerning these profound developments steadily deepens and broadens, public attention quite naturally shifts towards understanding precisely how this most recent development integrates itself into the much broader, intricate pattern of events that have systematically unfolded since Meghan and Harry's definitive departure from their roles in royal life. For a great many seasoned observers, this current situation feels significantly less like an isolated, singular decision and far more like another consequential chapter in a long-running, complex narrative centered around themes of control, individual autonomy, and the enduring struggle between venerable, ancient institutions and evolving, modern identities. Within the innermost palace circles, this cumulative effect of successive events is reportedly what precipitates the most profound and pervasive anxiety. It is not merely a concern about what is transpiring in the present moment, but rather what these current events suggest could potentially happen next, and, crucially, how exceedingly difficult it has demonstrably become to accurately predict or effectively manage the myriad of potential consequences that may arise. Among the recurring concerns frequently articulated by royal commentators, a persistent undercurrent of unease swirls around the fundamental question of precedent. The venerable institution of the monarchy operates upon a meticulously preserved tapestry of traditions, carefully handed down through the ages precisely because they are the very bedrock that creates an unbroken thread of continuity across successive generations. When an individual who once occupied a prominent and influential position within that intricate system continues to capitalize upon their former royal association while simultaneously endeavoring to construct an entirely independent platform, it inevitably challenges deeply entrenched and long-held assumptions regarding the expected parameters of conduct for former royals. Meghan's actions, whether intentionally conceived or not, may be perceived by many as fundamentally redefining what it truly signifies to step away from the royal fold without fully disappearing from the public eye, and that inherent ambiguity significantly unsettles an institution meticulously built upon clearly defined roles and responsibilities. There is also the undeniable international dimension that demands careful consideration within this evolving narrative. Meghan and Harry are no longer merely perceived as reminders of internal family tensions. They have undeniably ascended to the status of global figures, commanding a truly international spotlight with a reach that extends far beyond the geographical confines of the United Kingdom. Any significant move they make, whether public or private, resonates with profound ripple effects across continents, influencing and subtly shaping public opinion about the very essence and future of the monarchy itself. Palace aides, it is widely reported, harbor a palpable apprehension that repeated cycles of controversy, even those that appear subtle or nuanced, will gradually chip away at the meticulously cultivated image of stability, duty, and unwavering service upon which the royal family depends so heavily. This concern is particularly acute in the diverse Commonwealth nations, where perceptions of the crown are already undergoing a careful and continuous reevaluation in the modern era. From Meghan's own perspective, however, a robust defense is often mounted by those who champion her cause, arguing with conviction that these concerns are fundamentally misplaced and, indeed, profoundly unfair. Her supporters earnestly point out that she has consistently articulated a clear desire to dedicate her energies to philanthropic causes, creative endeavors, and genuinely meaningful work, rather than becoming entangled in the intricate web of royal drama. In this particular view, any anxiety emanating from the palace merely reflects a deep-seated resistance to acknowledging the possibility that someone can indeed leave the institution and still flourish independently, forging a successful path on her own terms. The undeniable fact that Meghan continues to command widespread attention, they argue, speaks volumes about her inherent influence and enduring relevance, rather than indicating any deliberate attempt to undermine the monarchy or its established protocols. Still, critics frequently counter this perspective by asserting that intent and impact are not always congruent. The best of intentions can inadvertently yield unintended consequences. Even if Meghan's primary goal is genuinely personal fulfillment or dedicated advocacy for specific causes, the inescapable reality is that her actions are inevitably filtered through the prism of her past association with the monarchy, interpreted primarily through a royal lens. Every carefully crafted interview, every widely disseminated announcement, or any visible public appearance becomes an integral part of a larger, often highly charged public discourse surrounding what went wrong and, crucially, who is to blame. This persistent and unavoidable association, they contend, regrettably keeps old wounds open and significantly complicates the palace's earnest efforts to transition smoothly into a new chapter, unburdened by lingering controversies, and to move forward quietly. Another significant layer of tension lies deeply embedded within the intricate internal dynamics of the royal household itself. Staff members, trusted advisors, and senior royals must constantly engage in a perpetual calculus regarding the most judicious course of action, meticulously assessing how to respond or, indeed, whether to respond at all to the ongoing narratives involving the Sussexes. A policy of dignified reticence has often been adopted as the preferred strategy, yet silence, paradoxically, can sometimes be misconstrued as an admission of culpability or a demonstration of vulnerability. Responding proactively, on the other hand, carries the inherent danger of intensifying the existing tensions, risking an escalation of the situation and drawing even more undesired attention to the very issues they might wish to diminish. Meghan's latest reported move is said to have once again brought this perennial quandary to the forefront, necessitating profound and often uncomfortable deliberations within the hallowed confines of the palace's closed doors. The pervasive influence of the press and digital platforms in amplifying these concerns cannot be overstated. Its capacity to magnify and disseminate information is immense. Sensational headlines, conjecture-laden commentary, and rapidly circulating social media debates frequently inflate the actual import of occurrences, assigning disproportionate weight and often exaggerating the significance of events. They frequently succeed in portraying them as direct clashes or adversarial encounters, irrespective of the original motivations or intentions. For the palace, this dynamic media environment is a landscape that is both well-trodden and perpetually vexing. Unlike Meghan, who hails from a professional sphere where the cultivation of public image and the meticulous crafting of one's own story are highly prized and valued, the monarchy is deeply embedded in a tradition of dignified reserve and deliberate understatement. This inherent and fundamental difference in approach, therefore, guarantees a continuous and often unavoidable clash of expectations and practices, ensuring ongoing friction. Finally, the bedrock of public confidence stands as another monumental consideration, a paramount concern that casts a long shadow over these discussions. The very legitimacy and continued viability of the royal family depends substantially upon the prevailing perception that it consistently acts in the national interest, transcending any individual dissatisfactions, personal grievances, or profit-driven commercial pursuits. When individuals who once occupied positions within the royal fold seem to indistinctly merge the boundaries between the recounting of their private experiences and a broader commentary on the systemic workings of the institution itself, it engenders a perplexing uncertainty regarding the locus of accountability and the true nature of their allegiances. Palace insiders, it is said, harbor legitimate apprehensions that a continuous inundation of these specific types of stories could incrementally erode the collective belief and assurance of the populace, a phenomenon that is particularly pronounced within the demographic of younger generations, who are already actively scrutinizing the contemporary utility and enduring purpose of the monarchical system. Concurrently, a significant number of Meghan's ardent supporters perceive her burgeoning influence not merely as an isolated phenomenon, but rather as an integral component of a far broader and more pervasive cultural transformation sweeping across contemporary society. They vociferously contend that venerable institutions, such as the ancient and revered monarchy, are absolutely compelled to undergo significant transformation and evolution, adapting comprehensively to a rapidly changing global landscape where the virtues of transparency, the imperative of accountability, and the inherent value of individual expression are increasingly cherished and highly prized. Viewed from this particular vantage point, any discernible discomfort emanating from the palace is not to be interpreted as an indication of impropriety or wrongdoing on Meghan's part. Instead, it serves as compelling evidence that the institution itself is grappling intensely, struggling perhaps even profoundly, to genuinely evolve and modernize in alignment with these emerging societal expectations. Consequently, her most recent public action or declaration then transcends the realm of a mere personal provocation, instead becoming powerfully symbolic of a much larger, overarching societal reckoning. Furthermore, there exists a profoundly personal dimension to this unfolding narrative, one which absolutely cannot be overlooked or dismissed as inconsequential. Stepping beyond the rigid confines of inherited titles, the intricate web of established protocols, and the weight of historical precedent, this is fundamentally a deeply human story centered upon complex family relationships subjected to an extraordinary and unrelenting degree of public scrutiny and immense pressure. Each successive public development or declaration is invariably layered with a rich and often tumultuous tapestry woven from unarticulated sentiments, deep-seated emotional currents, and a myriad of unresolved conflicts, all intertwined with competing narratives of profound hurt and perceived responsibility. The palpable concern within the palace walls may very well stem as much from a fervent, intrinsic desire to diligently protect the sanctity of private family bonds and intimate connections as it does from pragmatic fears surrounding the institution's public image and its carefully curated reputation. The formidable challenge, therefore, lies in navigating the delicate equilibrium required to balance genuine compassion with judicious caution, particularly within an environment where every single gesture, every uttered word, and every discernible nuance is meticulously scrutinized, dissected, and often amplified by the relentless glare of the global media. The pervasive speculation regarding potential future interactions between the parties involved contributes yet another intricate layer to the pervasive sense of apprehension and uncertainty that currently envelopes the situation. A central, pressing question looms large. Will there ultimately emerge genuine opportunities for meaningful reconciliation and the mending of fractured bonds? Or have their respective trajectories irrevocably diverged to an extent that bridge-building appears increasingly improbable, if not entirely impossible? Certain astute royal watchers and seasoned commentators firmly believe that the continuation of various ongoing public projects and initiatives only serves to complicate and hinder the arduous process of rebuilding trust, primarily because these activities inevitably keep past grievances, perceived slights, and historical disputes in perpetual circulation within the public consciousness. Conversely, other equally compelling voices argue passionately that heightened visibility and an unwavering commitment to honesty, even if profoundly uncomfortable in the immediate future, constitute absolutely necessary and indispensable steps toward achieving genuine healing and resolution. Meghan's latest strategic move, therefore, finds itself squarely positioned at the very epicenter of this vigorous and multifaceted debate, embodying simultaneously both the tantalizing possibility of future accord and the inherent, considerable risk of further alienation. Ultimately, what fundamentally ignites and sustains the deep-seated apprehension within the palace walls is the pervasive specter of uncertainty. The venerable monarchy, with its long and storied history, possesses a well-demonstrated capacity to competently manage and navigate various forms of criticism, public controversy, and even occasional scandal, particularly when the precise parameters, boundaries, and expected outcomes are clearly understood and established. What the institution profoundly struggles with, however, is the unsettling and disruptive force of unpredictability, especially when it emanates from an individual who possesses such a nuanced and profound understanding of the immense power and far-reaching influence of modern media platforms. Meghan's carefully considered actions, whether ultimately perceived by observers as empowering and progressive or as undeniably disruptive and challenging to the established order, invariably introduce a multitude of complex variables and dynamic elements that are not readily amenable to the established, conventional methods of management and control that have historically served the institution so reliably. This persistent and underlying tension ensures that every single development, no matter how seemingly inconsequential or minor in its initial appearance, is meticulously observed, exhaustively analyzed, and interpreted with the broadest possible range of implications across the global stage. As the torrent of public interest continues its unabated and vigorous growth, the overarching narrative progressively shifts its focus, becoming significantly less about the actions of a single individual and far more about a profound and often volatile collision between the entrenched traditions of the past and the undeniable imperatives of the contemporary era. Meghan Markle, in her very persona and public actions, undeniably represents a distinctly new kind of royal narrative, one that masterfully and sometimes controversially blends the pervasive allure of modern celebrity culture with the solemn weight of inherited symbolism and ancient lineage. The palace, with its foundational roots firmly embedded in a heritage meticulously cultivated over many hundreds of years, stretching back through countless generations of monarchy, is now faced with the monumental and inescapable task of determining precisely how to effectively coexist with this evolving and undeniable reality. Whether this palpable concern ultimately transmutes into a proactive strategy of genuine adaptation and progressive change or solidifies into a stance of entrenched resistance and steadfast adherence to tradition remains to be definitively seen. But what is undeniably clear is that this dynamic, ever-evolving interplay shows absolutely no discernible sign of receding from the intense global spotlight anytime soon. As this compelling and complex unfolding story continues its inexorable forward trajectory, the far-reaching and enduring consequences that stretch into the foreseeable future, stemming from Meghan's latest strategic move, are what truly and deeply occupy the minds of astute royal observers and well-informed palace insiders alike. Beyond the ephemeral nature of immediate headlines and the often heated daily debates, there is a palpable and growing sense that the venerable monarchy is, in fact, confronting a truly defining moment in the very manner by which it relates to and interacts with former members who, quite resolutely, demonstrate a disinclination to recede gracefully or unobtrusively into the periphery of public consciousness. Meghan's sustained and prominent visibility inevitably forces an uncomfortable but absolutely unavoidable question to the forefront of discussion. Can an ancient institution, steeped in centuries of time-honored custom and protocol, genuinely coexist with a vibrant, modern figure who operates by an entirely different set of contemporary rules and expectations? Or will the inherent and often palpable tension between these two fundamentally divergent forces only continue to intensify and perhaps even escalate into further open conflict? Amongst the most profound and subtly pervasive anxieties quietly permeating the inner circles of the institution is the critically important issue of legacy. The royal family, keenly aware of its place in history, is acutely conscious that the annals of time and the judgment of future generations will scrutinize and evaluate not merely the individual actions of its members, but rather the overarching manner in which this particular era is ultimately remembered and chronicled as a unified whole. Every single public narrative, every media report, and every recounted anecdote involving Meghan and Harry thus becomes an indelible part of that permanent historical record, contributing to the collective memory. From the carefully considered perspective of the palace, there is a profound and deep-seated anxiety regarding how future generations of historians and citizens will ultimately interpret these complex and challenging years. Whether they will perceive an institution valiantly struggling to protect its core essence and integrity amidst a turbulent world, or conversely, one that is perceived as fundamentally failing to listen attentively, to genuinely understand, and to adequately adapt to the evolving demands of a modern society. Meghan's unwavering and ongoing independence, therefore, actively precludes any definitive, tidy conclusion or any convenient, advantageous reinterpretation of this ongoing saga, effectively keeping that pivotal chapter perpetually open for continued scrutiny and interpretation. Across the venerable institution, a profound and increasingly undeniable realization is taking hold. The time-honored methods of managing public perception and navigating periods of intense scrutiny, which have served the monarchy for many decades, appear to be losing their efficacy. For more than 50 years, the royal household skillfully navigated challenges by meticulously controlling access to information, strategically employing selective periods of silence, and issuing statements through a process of slow, often highly deliberate, communication. Yet, in the current epoch, characterized by the immediacy of instant reactions and the omnipresence of global digital platforms, such a measured approach frequently strikes observers as profoundly anachronistic. The inherent ease with which Meghan embraces contemporary digital media for storytelling and engages directly with a vast audience serves to illuminate this chasm in an exceptionally stark manner. Consequently, the apprehensions within the palace extend beyond mere concerns about her individual actions. They are fundamentally rooted in what these actions unveil regarding the institution's inherent susceptibility and fragility within a world that is undergoing ceaseless and rapid transformation. Conversely, a significant contingent of Meghan's staunch supporters passionately contend that this very discomfort, palpable within the established order, is precisely the reason why her continued presence and voice hold such profound importance. They firmly believe that her trajectory and choices serve to unveil inherent systemic flaws and long-standing imperfections that have, for a great many years, remained artfully concealed behind an intricate tapestry of rigid protocol and elaborate ceremony. From this particular vantage point, the burgeoning apprehension expressed by those within the palace walls is perceived as being less about any authentic or tangible harm, and considerably more about the perceived erosion of their previously unchallenged authority to dictate and control the public narrative. Meghan's remarkable capacity to operate effectively outside the traditional confines of the royal system, while simultaneously exerting a significant and undeniable influence on the broader public discourse surrounding it, fundamentally challenges the deeply ingrained notion that the monarchy alone possesses the exclusive prerogative to define its public image and articulate its core values. However, from an opposing perspective, a growing number of thoughtful critics voice considerable apprehension regarding the potential for widespread public fatigue to gradually set in. They observe that the incessant, almost cyclical nature of speculation, immediate reaction, and subsequent counterreaction possesses the distinct capacity to steadily erode public sympathy and understanding across all the involved parties. There exists a palpable risk that audiences, bombarded by this continuous saga, might ultimately become desensitized to the nuances, perceiving the entire complex situation merely as an unending, petty feud, rather than a substantive and meaningful discussion concerning vital matters of institutional reform, evolving identity, or fundamental fairness. Those intimately connected with the palace, the insiders who witness these dynamics firsthand, may legitimately fear that this protracted and ongoing drama serves as a significant distraction from the monarchy's crucial charitable missions and its broader commitment to public service, thereby regrettably reducing both complex institutions and distinguished individuals to mere simplistic, often unflattering, tabloid caricatures. Furthermore, one distinct aspect that undeniably amplifies the gravity of the palace's concerns is the pronounced generational divide evident within the populace. Younger audiences, typically those under the age of 40 or thereabouts, frequently interpret Meghan's actions through a specific and powerful lens of personal empowerment and authentic self-expression. In stark contrast, individuals belonging to older generations, often those above the age of 60, may instead perceive these very same actions as regrettable breaches of long-established decorum or fundamental loyalty. This significant divergence in perspective is not merely an isolated incident. Rather, it reflects much broader, underlying societal changes that are sweeping across the nation and beyond. Such a deeply entrenched split places the monarchy in an extraordinarily difficult and precarious position. How precisely does it endeavor to remain pertinent and resonate with its younger cohorts of supporters, simultaneously avoiding the alienation of those who steadfastly cherish and uphold traditional values? Meghan's sustained and highly visible prominence serves only to further sharpen this intricate dilemma, rendering the maintenance of a neutral stance increasingly arduous and complex. Moreover, a crucial financial dimension, though seldom openly acknowledged or publicly debated, undeniably contributes to the prevailing sense of unease within the royal establishment. The intricate blending of an individual's past royal association with various commercial ventures and entrepreneurial pursuits inevitably gives rise to a multitude of complex ethical questions, issues that the palace, with considerable diligence, is exceptionally keen to meticulously avoid. Even in instances where Meghan is scrupulously careful not to directly allude to or reference her royal past, the indelible connection remains strikingly unavoidable in the broad sweep of public perception. This dynamic effectively creates a nebulous and often fraught gray area, a territory the monarchy has for an exceedingly long time striven assiduously to steer entirely clear of. Consequently, each new commercial project or public endeavor undertaken brings with it renewed and intensified scrutiny, prompting persistent queries about precisely where the boundaries are to be drawn, and, perhaps more significantly, who ultimately possesses the authority to delineate those vital distinctions. On an undeniably emotional level, the cumulative toll exacted by this protracted and often agonizing tension simply cannot be underestimated in its profound impact. Beneath the veneer of meticulously crafted formal statements and strategically deployed periods of silence lie actual individuals, grappling with profound disappointment, gnawing frustration, and a persistent sense of unresolved conflict. The apprehension emanating from the palace, therefore, is far from being purely a matter of strategic calculation. It is, at its very core, profoundly and deeply human. To witness intensely personal family matters being repeatedly and often mercilessly dissected upon a vast global stage inevitably extracts a heavy psychological price, and Meghan's continuing, highly public visibility ensures that these deeply personal wounds are, with lamentable infrequency, afforded the necessary time and quiet space to genuinely heal away from the glare of public scrutiny. Yet, concurrently, Meghan's remarkable resilience and unyielding determination resonate with extraordinary potency among a vast number of individuals across the globe, many of whom perceive their own personal struggles and aspirations vividly mirrored in the unfolding narrative of her journey. The compelling story of a woman diligently carving out her unique identity and charting her own course after experiencing the profound constraints imposed by a powerful and ancient institution proves to be particularly captivating in an era that places paramount value upon authenticity, individual agency, and profound self-determination. This widespread and deeply felt resonance is precisely what elevates her to such a potent and influential public figure, and it is also the fundamental reason why the concerns within the palace continue to persist with unwavering intensity. Influence of such considerable magnitude and far-reaching scope is, by its very nature, exceedingly challenging to effectively counter or adequately contain. As one contemplates the unfolding future, a pivotal and profound inquiry emerges. Will the intricate and often turbulent dynamic between these distinct entities ever truly settle into a state of serene equilibrium? Some observers hold the conviction that, with the inexorable passage of time, the fervent intensity of public interest and scrutiny will naturally dissipate, thereby allowing both sides to exist in their separate spheres without the constant abrasion of friction. Conversely, others contend with equal conviction that as long as Meghan's independent endeavors and the deeply entrenched image of the monarchy continue to intersect, even in the most indirect and subtle ways, the underlying tension will stubbornly persist. The palace, in its strategic calculations, may harbor a profound hope for a greater measure of distance and a return to a more traditional quietude. However, the trajectory of Meghan's chosen path strongly indicates a continued, proactive engagement with the wider world on her own carefully defined terms. Beyond the immediate interplay, there also exists the compelling possibility that this ongoing and widely observed saga could fundamentally transform into a potent catalyst for meaningful, systemic change. It is a well-documented historical pattern that venerable institutions frequently undergo evolution not because of an inherent desire for transformation from within, but rather because they are compelled by external pressures to confront uncomfortable, often long-ignored truths. Meghan's personal journey, undeniably controversial and subject to relentless public debate as it may be, has nonetheless served to ignite crucial and often overdue national and international dialogues concerning deeply entrenched societal issues such as systemic racial biases, the often stigmatized realities of mental health, evolving perceptions of gender roles, and the inherent, sometimes suffocating, rigidity of long-standing traditions. From this particular vantage point, the initial concern emanating from the palace could, over an extended period, eventually give way to a profound period of internal reflection and, ultimately, to significant institutional reform, even if such a transformative process is destined to be painstakingly slow and inherently uneven in its progression. Ultimately, the overarching narrative transcends the individual stories of Meghan Markle or the royal family in isolated contemplation. It delves into universal themes of power dynamics, the complex tapestry of identity formation, and the enduring human struggle to define oneself authentically either within or distinctly outside of venerable systems that have profoundly shaped societies for many centuries. Meghan's latest move, whatever its specific manifestation, carries profound significance not merely for what it explicitly articulates, but more importantly for the powerful symbolism it embodies within this expansive, global context. It serves to challenge deeply ingrained assumptions, provoke vigorous and often contentious public debate, and steadfastly refuses to allow the complexities of the past to remain comfortably buried and unexamined. As the global public continues its unwavering gaze, dissecting every development, analyzing every nuance, and engaging in passionate arguments across countless platforms, one undeniable truth remains strikingly clear. This particular chapter in a much larger story is unequivocally far from reaching its conclusion. Concerns within the palace are likely to persist, maintaining their strategic relevance for as long as Meghan remains a visibly prominent and influential figure, consistently willing to courageously chart her own distinctive course. Whether that persistent concern ultimately precipitates a deeper and more entrenched division, or conversely, inspires a visionary reimagining of what the monarchy can truly represent and embody in the dynamic modern world, remains a profoundly open and unresolved question. What is unequivocally evident is that the dramatic intersection of deeply rooted tradition and transformative societal forces has rarely been laid bare with such vivid clarity, and the ultimate outcome of this ongoing, compelling tension will undoubtedly shape the narratives surrounding the royal institution for many years to come.